So majorly they were targeting, those systems like, network load balancers and other, so which has access to multiple systems. So, that would be like a centralized control for them.
Hmm.
And AnyDesk was specially used for persistence and command and control. So, whenever they want, they can get access. But there is one more point I would like to mention here, that before installing these tools, they were also disabling the processes responsible for antiviruses and other things, so that they can flawlessly keep on installing and doing other things. And they were able to do it because, as initially we mentioned, that they have already got the admin privileges, the accounts, and so they could, whenever they want, they can disable anything of their choice.
As you know about, this is very dynamic in nature. They are not
Yeah.
targeting a drive. They're directly establishing connection to memory. So how challenging was for you to identify these tools, and what methods, did you employ to uncover them?
Yeah, we
The
will.
very first thing, please, Abhijeet.
No, sorry, Chirayu, please go ahead. Because I was saying that we have kept it for the later stage when we'll
Okay,
be talking about the registry hives, which were very useful for us, and the file system.
no issues. Yeah.
But I think, Chirayu, we have few more things when we will be discussing about the lateral moment as well, which you would like to share, and then we'll go to this question.
Okay.
Sure. The one thing that in the lateral movement we would like to highlight is that we mentioned about reflective injection,
Hmm.
because it is directly targeting the memory. This particular tactic is known as living off the land. There
Okay.
are no traces that is created on the target machine, nor any log is created, nor there is any kind of script that is written to the hard drive. Since the attacker has access to the network, he has access to some kind of privileged credentials. He can basically use PowerShell to initiate these attacks and simply copy a file, the etds.dat file from the Active Directory, which is going to
Okay.
give him more credentials and more access to the network. And this particular concept is known as living off the land. It is pretty difficult to detect these kind of attacks if you are only relying on antiviruses or EDRs.
True.
There is specific configurations that we can make to ensure that if there is some kind of attack going on that is using a living off the land technique, it can be detected by the log monitoring team, the blue team basically.
Okay.
And also, like, we would like to discuss again, keeping from a defense perspective as well, like the answer to your question, like what were certain indicators that we were useful for us. So I would like to discuss few things and also a scenario which will make the things more clear. So I have gathered few things, from the which actually helped us to understand the concept well. So you can see on the screen, and this is also very useful for from the monitoring perspective as well. So what you see in the screen is, you see there is a sequence. There is an event ID 4624, and then 21, 22, and 24. So event ID 4624 is a successful login. However, along with this ID, if you're getting a logon type 10, because there are many different kinds of logon type, but you are specifically getting 10, that means it's a RDP connection. It's a sure shot RDP connection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once the RDP connection was made, then you can see the next event ID is 21, which is RDP, a session logon has succeeded. It's a successful RDP connection. And then 22 means that the shell has started, the shell start notification is received. And then 24 is it has been disconnected. So we found frequent, this was again and again occurring. That means it was occurring to multiple IP addresses, which clearly shows that the hacker, as we mentioned earlier, that was taking RDP connections again and again and again. So that was one of the things which we observed, that which made us know that RDP was very extensively used. Now, second thing, you can see that what the hackers tried to do is that whatever accounts they had access to, uh, we found a frequent existence of 4648 event code. Now, when does this occur? When a logon was attempted using explicit credentials. So what they were doing is, they were logging in using one user credential, and then let's say they want to access the backup. So in many cases, we found that there were some certain backups which they're trying to access. If they had the credentials for the backup, then they were also using those credentials explicitly to enter and get access to. I'm not saying all explicit logins are malicious, but these has to be closely monitored, is what I'm saying. That you have to closely monitor that what is the reason, what is the cause of occurrence of 4648. It could be malicious in many cases. Now, the second thing is 4720. This is a very interesting event code. it is legit in most of the cases, but in our case, we have found that when the hackers, as we said, the hackers were getting credentials from outside as well, from the dark web market. So in that case, if the hackers have username and password, so they will be logging in. And in many cases, we have seen that when they were getting global admin privilege, they were also creating new accounts. So whenever a new account is created, the event code 4720 gets logged in. So any kind of new account, if it is created, this has to be closely monitored, because is it legit or not? That is the question. In our case, we found a lot of illegitimate accounts were created, because when we inquired with the organizations we were investigating that, do you know this account? They were like, no. And it was so funny, sometimes the names would be really funny, like some celebrities and other names, because the hackers were trying to, separate it from so that they can know that what accounts they have created. But my point here is that this event code is pretty important. And the other thing is, when they're creating account, they're also giving, making modifications to the account. And this is again a very important point. Once the accounts are created, if you see event code 4738, like in this case, 4738 means a user account was changed. And you can see what was the change. The change was don't expire password enabled. Do you think it's the right thing to do? I don't think so. Password should expire. But why did they do that? Because when they later on take AnyDesk connections and create persistence, the password should not expire, so that they can have consistent access. So we found a lot of traces of these as well. So that is the reason why, this is another thing which helped us to know that, okay, this is what the hackers were doing. And also from the defense perspective, these event codes should be very carefully monitored. Other thing you can see, yes, Chirayu, I think you were saying something.
Please continue.
Okay. So other thing which we saw, PowerShell. Now this, again, I'll be getting back to this point in the malware analysis as well, but just wanted to show that you can see that this is the Windows PowerShell event codes which are generated, and these are sequence. And you can see this is the most famous command of Akira, where the volume shadow copies were deleted.
Wow.
How did we get to know about this? Because there was an occurrence of these event codes actually. As you can clearly see on the screen, 400, 600, and 403. 400, it indicates when the new PowerShell host process has started. 600 is when the PowerShell activity is on the system. So the activity is this activity which was taking place. And once the activity was over, then 403 was generated. So this is just one example, but there were a lot of occurrence of similar patterns of PowerShell as well. So when we further investigated, we found that, this is the reason why PowerShell commands were used. And these were also certain indicators that, an extensive use of PowerShell and WMI was also done. So these are certain event codes which are very useful. Apart from that, this is something with which I would like to summarize the explanation which I'm giving. So here you can see, this is actually a log from a SIM solution. So you can see the account was created on a certain date. How did we get to know? Because it is generating event ID 4720. So the account was created here, but for the next couple of months, there was no activity using this account. There can be many reasons. But then after 2 to 3 months, you can see this particular account was used for doing all sort of malicious activity. In this case, the malicious activity was the Akira ransomware execution.
Akira ransomware, yeah.
So in this case, what we observed is that the same thing which we were talking about, the same thing which Chirayu was mentioning, initial access broker. That means once the account was for sale. Once it was created, probably it was compromised and it was for sale in the dark web. The adversaries who wanted to do the ransomware attack, they got it from there, and then they used it for logging in and doing all sort of what do you call, in this case it was a Akira ransomware infection. Why we are so confirmed about it? Because later on when we did a reverse study on this, we found that whatever account we are talking about here, it was already there like months back on the dark web for sale. So that proved the point that yes, this account was already stolen by someone and it was put on the dark web for sale. And the adversaries who were running the Akira, they were different. They probably purchased it from there and they were using it. As you can see, there's a sudden spike. All of a sudden, after two months, there's a sudden spike with this account. And I have mentioned all sort of event IDs. Like there were RDP connections. We got to know from these event codes which are generated. There were PowerShell executions. And when we investigated the PowerShell script, they were all malicious. There were WMI events as well. There were executions of processes, and those are malicious executables which are executed, including the cryptor, the executable which is used to encrypt everything. So you can see that this is how the entire thing actually works. So I think this
this initial access brokers, this has been changing the threat landscape leaps and bounds, because
True.
they're only the only part of this IAB, the initial access brokers, is to infiltrate an organization, put the foot in the door, and leave it there. Then they sell this access to other threat actors so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel and start to target an organization right from brute forcing, hacking, persistence, and then executing the ransomware. They can just purchase this access from IAB and deploy their payloads there. And this was only confirmed once we saw this pattern that, okay, a user account is created, admin user account is created. And after 3 months, like for the entire 3 months, there is no activity. And post 3 months, the immediate activity that is done from these admin accounts is malicious activity.
True.
So this confirms that the people who are the parties who are involved in this particular hack is not just one party. There are multiple parties who are involved in this.
True.
Okay. So how long it take you to investigate this entire things?
First I'll start with the first thing is that when we started with the investigation, the primary thing that we did is that we followed all the golden thumb rules of digital forensics. We made sure that whatever piece of digital evidence we are seeing in front of us is first cloned. We made clones of all the infected systems, the physical infected systems. We took a backup of all the logs that were there, the firewall logs. We also took the backup of the EDR logs that were present there. And then all this data was ingested into a digital forensic processing software. And then we processed this software using our tools. Like we have a number of tools in our digital forensic lab. Like there is Encase, there is Axiom, there is Autopsy. So we use multiple tools to basically extract this information. And when we were investigating the end user systems, the physical servers which were hacked, and we had a clone copy of that, we came across multiple digital forensic artifacts, which Abhijeet will explain you what importance they have and how we should correlate these artifacts with the executables that we find in the investigation, forensic investigation.
Right. Very rightly mentioned that, because you see, it's a very extensive attack. So we were not getting the answers like straight away. But yeah, there are certain traces. Like the first thing which I showed that there were logs, the event IDs. Apart from that, you see, within the operating system, when we took the clone, we processed it. So there are certain, registry locations, registry hypes, and certain information from the file systems. In this case, we are talking about Windows environment, so we'll be talking about NTFS file system. There are certain attributes which helps the investigators a lot to get information about certain files, details, and execution, proof of execution. Like you can see the first example, you can see that AnyDesk advanced IP scanner. So as we discussed that these tools were used for creating persistence and for gathering first-hand information reconnaissance, we got it from the AMCache. So you can see when you talk about Windows registry, AMCache, if you find any traces of any executable within AMCache, that is a proof that it has been executed at a certain time. So that is 100% proof. To start with, in the registry, we have ntuser.dat file. So ntuser.dat, when we extract the information from this particular registry hype, it actually gives us information about the current user and what activities were performed using this current user's account. Within this, certain parameters that we look for is AMCache, which is a proof. If there is any executable trace within the AMCache, that means it is 100% that it was executed. The second thing is user assist. If we want to know that how many times the executable was executed, so it also gives us the count, and also we get to know about the time when it was exactly executed. So these kind of things we can get from these particular locations. Apart from that, if we want to know what folders were accessed, then there is shellback. And similarly, we also have file system. Within file system, NTFS, I think that was one of the major reasons why the file system from FAT1632 was moved to NTFS. It is really helpful for forensic investigators, especially with the parameters like information we extract from the master, MFT master file table, dollar journal, and log files. The information that we get is the presence of the file, how many times the file was renamed, when the file was deleted. So in a nutshell, if you're getting any files information in the file system, that clearly proves the file existed. And if you're getting any proof from AMCache or user assist, that means that is a clear proof of execution. So by combining these two informations which you get from the registry hives and the file systems, we were able to extract the names of the executables which were executed, and also proof that they were executed and they existed. So what we have done is, I mean, later on you can add it to the description as well, that what are the important registry locations that we need to look for. Especially if you are, it is in both ways. I mean, not only for forensic investigators, but it would be helpful for everyone. So you can see these locations, especially if you look for run. So many times, every time you start, if anything is added to the startup. So this is especially for achieving persistence. Many times you have seen that when it is added to the startup, it will execute again and again. So this is the place where you can find that, okay, these are the executables which has been added to run again and again to create persistence. Similarly, there are a lot of other things, like if there is any USB which was ever connected. So these are the registry locations from where the connection of the USB can be found. And then there are certain event IDs which we can correlate to find when the USB was connected and when it was taken out, and what were the activities which were performed when the USB was connected, and who was the user who was logged in when the USB was connected. So everything has to be combined together. Now, I mean, these informations in today's world, we have specialized tools, very powerful tools which can automatically extract. But my suggestion would be, even for people who are who are willing to work in the field of forensic, that the basics should be very clear. We understand there are tools, but we also cross verify by manually going to these locations, because tools are definitely there for the ease, but nothing can beat when you manually go to these locations and you yourself find out. That is the biggest proof. So that's the reason why I would highly recommend, especially for SOC or people who are looking for a career in forensic, that stick to the basics. Tools are definitely there, but these things should be very clear.
That's a great important, because I always prefer, I even in my podcast, I use the same thing. Before going to mastery the tool, understand the process first, mastery the concept first.
True.
So any other, you have an insight about this particular case, you want to share with the viewers who are watching this video?
Yes, absolutely. Because I would also like to share some information about the analysis which we did, the malware analysis. So you see, we went to pretty in depth, but I would just keep, I would not be covering all the things, but few things which are pretty important, like a brief about what exactly the file which was responsible for encrypting the data, what exactly it was doing. So for this, we created a sandbox environment and we executed the exe file multiple times. And you can see this is from where we got a lot of insight about it. So you can see the first thing that we found was that WMI was used. In this case, you can see Windows Management Instrumentation Provider Service. And PowerShell is the child process for this. And within PowerShell, you can see that everything has to be correlated. So when we found that the first thing which was happening is, this is how it was getting executed. The first thing was this. And in PowerShell, when PowerShell was executed, so we straight away went to the event logs, because we know that PowerShell is getting executed. So definitely some event logs will be generated. And these were the event logs which were generated. And from these event logs, we knew that something was getting executed in the PowerShell. And further analysis showed that this is the script which was getting executed. And this is exactly the script which is used for deleting the volume shadow copy. Right. So you can see how the correlation has to be done. The other thing is, let me just go to this. Using tools, we also found that, because we have to understand that there is something which is called portable executable format. And there are API calls, there are DLLs and functions which are used. Because let's put it in a very simple way, that if you're executing something in a Windows environment, so that executable needs certain resources to be provided to it in the form of, API calls, functions, certain DLLs has to be accessed. So not all the resources or the functions or the DLLs utilized are, should be utilized by this particular executable. Let me give you a small example. In many occasions, if you see that notepad.exe is executed, we know that notepad.exe is never used for creating any connection. But under further analysis, we found that notepad.exe, when it was executing, it was utilizing wsock.dll. So wsock.dll is a DLL which is used for creating connections. So why would Notepad be using DLLs like this and utilizing the functions within the DLLs? So that is a red flag. So these kind of things have to be observed. And you can see that we use tools where, these DLLs were extracted, that what are the DLLs this executable is not meant to use, but it is still using. Certain changes in the registry, certain new keys which are created in the registry. But to keep it short, you can see that specifically for encryption, these, just give me a moment here. Let me just, these API calls should be focused on, because you can see, because this is what we notice for encryption. As I said, that hybrid encryption was used. So public key, private key, and symmetric keys were used. So these were the functions which were used, like crypt acquire context, crypt string to binary, crypt import public key, crypt gen random, crypt encrypt. This is exactly where the encryption took place with the symmetric key. So these are the functions, which if they're happening in this sequence, that means it's a trigger. Some sort of encryption is going on if you're not doing it from your side. If it is not legit, definitely, because we found it in our case. And the other thing is we have to understand that Akira was not targeting all the files, because there were certain file extensions which it was targeting and certain it was not, like .exe, .sys, these were not getting encrypted for obvious reasons. So it used to gather information about the file size, attributes of the file by running these functions. So you can see that these are the functions which were used to gather information about the file and then further encrypt them. And also I have a screenshot of some of the native commands. Actually, you can see that I would not say that these are illegal commands, but search protocol host, search filter host, these where we saw the traces of these, the existence of these when we executed the exe, the encryption executable. So you can see that those were the functions which are called and these were getting executed. Why these were executed? Because initially it was trying to gather information about the file. It was trying to find out the file size, because we have to understand Akira did not encrypt the entire file. It was encrypting a certain portion of the file. And also the other thing is that it was also extracting the metadata of the file, because you can see I've also mentioned here that .sys, .msi, .dll, .lnk, .exe, and most importantly the file which was created by Akira, the threat, the threat node, that was also txt in nature. So it also made point that that particular file will not get encrypted, even though other txts will get encrypted, so that the victims will read and they would know that what to do next. Another yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, another interesting fact which we found is that, you see, like for instance, this win locker, and then I have just I have just hidden that information, because this is actually a sort of key. So in the threat note, they were mentioning that when they go to the portal for making the payment, this is actually the code which they have to enter to get access and then make the payment. And for every attack which they might have done to multiple organizations, this code is different. So that is how they keep a track of, they also have the repository of, they're keeping a track of, okay. Yeah. So that is also something which was pretty interesting to note.
This is something I was, waiting for this, because everyone talk about, dumping the logs and all that, and, not sharing the case, not sharing the insight about the each and every point. And then thanks for bringing this particular thing in this particular session. And really kudos to you, Chirayu and Abhijeet.
Thank you so much. And also last but not the least, you see this log file which is created. This is the most immediate thing which happens when you execute this the encryption, the executable. And if you go through these log file, it also gives you a lot of information about what actions are actually taking place when you execute it. So that was also some thing to look for if from an investigator perspective.
That was a really great insight, when it comes to the requirement of investigations and all. So what is the countermeasures, how to prevent this? Can you just share the insight on that area if possible?
Sure. So I think Chirayu, you can start with the countermeasures and then
countermeasures are if you talk about countermeasures for ransomware, those are pretty common and well known. But in this session, I would be specifically speaking about, because we have mentioned and we have discovered this living off the land technique, the reflective injection technique, and how stealth it is by the attackers. We are going to show what can be done in order to identify these kind of attacks, what preventions or what configurations can be done. So there is one configuration that basically speaks about if a PowerShell has been used or WMI has been used to basically query another computer using credentials, okay, or using a particular exe, then the audit process creation should be logged. Yeah. in the group policies, this particular audit process creation should be enabled. So in term, what happens is that if any kind of executable is triggered on a system by a remote host, there will be a log created for this, and whatever arguments are supplied to that executable. If, for example, that the executable is PowerShell.exe, by default, the system will only log PowerShell.exe. The arguments that are supplied to it, it won't log that. So it is necessary to enable include command line in process creation events. It has
Which you
been
can see
shown
on the
in
screen.
screenshot
Yeah.
written below. Include command line in process creation events. So whatever argument is supplied after PowerShell.exe will also be recorded. And if that things are recorded, if these things fall in the log, are recorded in the logs, it becomes easy for the blue team members to detect if there is any kind of malicious execution there, based on the arguments that are present in the log, in the event log.
Okay.
So this is one way how reflective injection or living of the land attacks can be detected, not prevented, but detected.
Because this is related
And,
to process, and process is created in the memory. So there is an event code, just would like to add that 4688, which will get generated. But in many occasions, we found that we understand that there is something which is a process is there, something is getting executed. But because this include command in the process creation event, this is not generally enabled. And if enabled, the SIM is not configured to, capture this information. So in many cases, it is really tough to know that what things were getting executed, what was the script. And you see, just to add to this, I'll give you an example. Like in many occasions, we found that hackers were creating scheduled task. So in that case, the scheduled task related process will be shown. But within scheduled task, what tasks were scheduled? What was the script? So that you can only view if this particular option, which very well explained by Chirayu, is enabled. If it is not, we'll just get to know, okay, this is. Another example is sbchost.exe, which is highly utilized by hackers. We'll just get to know sbchost.exe. But what was sbchost.exe doing? What scripts were utilized? That we'll only get to know if this parameter is enabled. So this becomes very important, configuration, which should be practiced, in all the organizations.
That is a concern, really concern. But it's a good thing that, okay, but the worst thing in when it comes to countermeasure part is basically the complexity of the solutions that we deploy or the best practice. And I don't think so. Every company basically follow this. Chirayu and Abhijeet, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. So what we have found is many do, many don't. What we have found is, you see, as the saying goes, that your SIM solution, your firewalls are as good as you configure. It is not the brand that, okay, we have such expensive devices, so we are safe. No, it is about how you configure them. So that is very important, that they should be correctly configured. And you see, that is the reason why threat intelligence becomes very important, because every day there are new threats. Even if you see the new standard of ISO 27000 2022, in the 11 new controls, threat intelligence is also a new control. Why? Because if you have a good threat intelligence team in action, they would know about the new threats. They can give the information to the incident response team. And based on that, the incident response team can implement the relevant corrective, preventive, and detective controls, which has to be implemented. Without threat intelligence being very active in organizations, you are more or less blind to what is going in the outside world. So threat intelligence and gathering the information through that becomes a very important thing. And I think companies should invest on. We have seen not many companies investing a lot on threat in threat intelligence, actually.
Right. And one thing, Prabh, is that the juicy information that Abhijeet was able to show today on screen is only because we were able to get this information from, say, there is a pool of 500 systems that are infected. Out of this pool of 500 systems, there was only one system where we got these evidences.
Sure.
So I'm trying to tell that what is the stealthiness that the hackers are trying to use here.
Yes.
And it really becomes difficult to detect or to prevent such kind of stealth activity by hackers.
True. So it's just like, finding a small trace within a pool of, information. So that's the thing.
It's basically the big thing, it's not small thing. Yeah, that's a great insight you shared, guys.
We've also included some event IDs that we talked about, that what event IDs, from a SOC perspective, you can look for, where you can look for these things. So we will share it and you can add it to the description.
Sure.
So people can get benefited out of it. And apart from that, I think there are, certain other things like backup. So you see, because in many cases, we also found that they were also trying to get access to backup. So 3-to-1 strategy should be used. 3-to-1 means the backup strategy involves creating 3 copies of your backup. 2 in different media, you can keep hard drive and tape drives, and then 1 in offsite. So at least if you lose everything, there is something at the offsite, your backup is there.
True.
So we'd highly recommend this. And specifically for virtualization, I would like to, we have also mentioned some event logs. Like if you're using a, Hyper-V environment, so these are the logs. Especially you can see if a VM is deleted, or if the storage is moved, which we saw in many cases. So these are the event IDs like 20927130003 will be generated, and these has to be closely monitored. Like what is the reason for occurrence? If you're talking about ESXi, then you can see if because ESXi environment is accessed by the vSphere client. So when someone is logging into the vSphere client, so you can see 1000 is the event ID which will get generated, and log of 1001. So these has to be closely monitored, who is logging in and what is the reason. And also if you're talking about ESXi itself, so you can see that there are places within ESXi environment from where you can capture the log. Like you can see on the screen, var run log host d.log. Now what we would suggest is that configure to capture the logs of these files through your SIM solution, so that if something is happening, at least later on you will get to know that what actually was the reason for the occurrence of the incident which took place.
True.
We in many cases found that things were not configured. So that's what I said, that and what Chirayu very rightly mentioned, that just having a SIM solution is not enough. You have to configure what data should be captured and what alerts should be created by the SIM solution, and not just rely on signature based. It should be behavioral based, pattern based. Only then attacks like this can be properly monitored and prevented up to a very large extent. And I think anything else, Chirayu, you would like to add, because there are some other points as well, which can be used for countermeasures.
Of course. Like the very first point where we discussed about how the hackers infiltrated the network, I think multi-factor authentication is something like MFA would have completely prevented this kind of infiltrations. So
True.
having MFA wherever possible is a very good thought to strengthen up the security. Adapting zero trust model, which is a lot trending right now, which basically is about having zero trust in the people who are using the network, and then assign them accesses as and when needed. So this definitely takes a toll on the, you can say, the processing and the ease of use of the network, but it definitely strengthens the security or creates a good, you can say, healthy environment to free from hackers or free from any kind of trust that is breached by hackers.
And apart from that, awareness trainings, and what is your thoughts on those areas? Yeah.
Awareness trainings, that is one thing that is really necessary to basically make sure that people do not click on links and they do not fall prey to attachments and anything. But apart from that, being vigilant, like nowadays people are using smartphones, but the phones are smart, the people are not smart, and that ends up putting them in trouble, and also the company they work for, the corporate environment they work for. Yes, awareness and training is definitely very necessary, and also having a hardened network, having policies and procedures configured on the SIM solutions on Active Directory, having very specific group policies set for the Active Directory environment, so that even if there is one kind of breach into the network, it is not a piece of cake for the hacker to do lateral movement. There should be the defense in depth methodology should be adopted, is what I feel.
And when it comes to the requirement of overall functions of detecting the new ransomwares and all that, what is the suggestion for the people who are watching this video? How to, in summary, if I say high level, if I say we say detect, discover, or something like that. So what is a high level summary? What is the tips and tricks, your gyan on the ransomware attacks?
I think the blue team should be strong enough.
Okay.
The real game lies there. In my perspective, the detection is good, the prevention would be better.
An example?
An example is, say, the policies that are configured on the AD, Active Directory, the firewalls, the end user systems, and the virtual environments, they're configured properly with the SIM. It it becomes easy for the blue team members to detect patterns, repetitive patterns. And when there is repetitive patterns that are detected, irrespective of the complexity, if there are repetitive patterns that are detected, it is quite easy for a person to identify that this is not a human activity. This
Okay.
is something that is automated, and this is something that is trying to breach the network in an automated manner. It is
Okay.
trying to scale the attack. So if the blue team game is strong here, then definitely the detection would be strong and prevention would be better, is what I feel.
That's
True.
really, yeah.
And just to add, you can see that threat intelligence again coming, that has to be emphasized, because you can see that Mitre is there. There are a lot of portals which give you information. And using the Mitre metrics, you can also align that. There are a lot of articles which we have also added. Actually, we will share. That can be used as references. Where solutions are given, they have correlated with the attacks, so that proactively you know that okay, these are the methods which are used by the attackers, and that is the reason why like for example, in today's discussion, if I go to certain slides, we have also added the tools which were majorly used. Like you can see. Let me just quickly go to the slide here. Yeah, so you can see here we have also made a note of all the tools which are used in different phases of this attack. So this is like an information which can be used by other organizations to proactively put a control, whitelisting, and other controls can be utilized so that the misuse of these kind of tools are prevented. So proactively, if you want to protect yourself, because every day there is a new attack, so threat intelligence will play a very important role. There is a saying that it's better to learn from others' mistake than learning from your own mistake.
Agree.
So that you can do if you're proactively prepared. And how can you be proactively prepared if you know that what is happening in the world? So threat intelligence definitely plays a very important role. That is the reason why a lot of well-known standards are now adapting it into their controls. That is the first thing I would highly recommend. That the second thing is awareness, like phishing campaigns, because phishing is also one of the methods which was very highly used. So phishing campaign should be there, because not everyone who is using a computer in an organization is an IT person, IT literate. So I'm not talking about going into depth and asking them to, okay, just the basics, that okay, how to recognize a phishing mail. A lot of phishing campaigns are there. Even we host a lot of phishing campaigns, and we have seen that in many occasions, some really well-known organizations, we see there are clicks, because phishing campaign, it goes in multiple labels, that who has opened the link, who has entered their credential to the link. So we have seen that, a lot of people, like in 500s or 600, we have seen that people are clicking and entering credentials. So you see, that means there is a huge gap. Awareness should be emphasized. And also very rightly, like Chirayu mentioned, that policies like principle of least privilege, need to know, acceptable use, these should be very highly emphasized. Access control, implicit deny as well. So if you and role based access controls, actually, so if these are properly implemented, then it would reduce the attack surface, it would reduce the intensity of the attack. So we found, because we also conduct a lot of auditing, and we have seen that on papers the policies are very well written, but in actual it's not properly followed. So that thing has to be taken care. And I think that again comes to awareness part, that people should know. And also, as we say, that the governing body themselves should be there should be a security culture in the organization. So the top level, the C level, should be very well aware of the security and what is the importance. Security should never be taken as a liability. In most of the companies, unfortunately, it is taken as a liability, because it doesn't have any immediate benefit until and unless you are hacked or some loss has taken place.
And
So,
until unless we don't learn from the lesson,
True.
which you said, same thing, then we can get the visibility. Yeah.
True. So that thing, a culture for security has to be there, and that comes from the top level. So that is what our suggestion should be.
That's great. That's great. And truly believe there are three important parameters I like about this podcast. One is basically the investigation of the logs and all. That was literally eye-opening. Second is basically about how you identify the things. It's really amazing. Because see, I'm not against something, but I haven't seen such kind of insights in other videos where this is always international level. But I believe that okay, this is something coming from the India, okay, made in India, by India. And I'm sure it will go
We're
global.
proud Indians.
Yeah. So I really feel that okay, this content will go huge hit. I personally feel, and can be a very eye opener for the CISOs and aspiring SOC professionals who going to use the same case studies, same reference model, because in the incident management, we also have a last phase called lesson learn. This video can be the lesson learned for them, by which they can able to improve their cybersecurity posture.
True.
But Chirayu, guys, we are recording this podcast on a weekend. For me, it is okay because I do my work on weekend. But these guys are working Monday to Friday. Sometime incident is there, and coming out and taking out the time on the weekend, sharing this insight. Really, guys, it's kudos to you, and it is really a great way to give back to the community.
Thank you.
And see, like if you talk about the people like bad actors and all that, they basically do the attack based on a gun. For me, I'm a bad actor here because on this gun point, which is like online session, I'm taking this opportunity to ask them, will they come again to the new insight?
We would definitely, I mean,
See,
it would be a pleasure.
This is recording, so they cannot say no to that. Non-reputation is there. So but I want from you guys, those who are watching this video, if you find this insight so useful, so great, so do share your suggestion comments. This video, definitely the suggestions I will pass to Mr. Abhijeet and Chirayu, and do let me know, shall we disturb them again, okay, from this schedule for the another session, practical session or forensic, instead of talking about just a theory. Because for me, if I spend my 1.5 hours on this particular podcast, I'm actually taking 8-hour content from there. I don't know whether you notice, Abhijeet, while you saying the statement or Chirayu, I was making a points, because that points was very useful for me to make my own podcast now. And that is how the learning happens. Okay.
Right.
So it's really amazing. Yeah.
I would definitely, it is wonderful. It's a pleasure for us, to be with the Prabh. So that is the thing.
You guys are bigger than me. See, I'm just a podcaster. I'm just hosting a show. I'm just acting like a bridge between the experience and the freshers, I'm just acting like
you're doing a great job.
No,
you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And you are spreading. You see, because I think me, Chirayu, we all would agree that we are in this profession because it's a passion for us. Otherwise, no one would come to this profession because there is a lot of research which is required. And I think Chirayu would remember that in many cases, we sometimes, we come to office late night at 10 and we go early in the morning 4 a.m. But that is a passion. That is because of passion, because we are like, we are so passion driven that it is so interesting that we just want to keep on doing this stuff again and again. And I would a big shout out for you, Prabh. And I mean, you are giving so much to the security community, and day in and day out, you get so much appreciation because you definitely deserve that. So
Thanks,
it's a pleasure for us coming to your podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
it is a pleasure sharing this platform with Prabh.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chirayu. And can we have one session in later stage, not now, like after 2 months or 3 months? Because there is one thing which is missing in this particular network is the practical forensic investigation. So it will be a great honor for us to have you again, and where you can drive one case study like the way we did with ransomware, practical, which basically clear the myth about forensics in the people's mind. That because for them forensics is a threat intel, and for threat intel it's a forensic. So there is a clear segregation between these two fields. So I hope it is okay with you guys. We can have one more session,
Absolutely.
2 more sessions. One is how to make career in forensics, because that's something is everyone want to see that scope of the forensics, and practical investigation of one more attacks, which is with the tools and all that. If you guys are okay with that.
Definitely. We'll definitely
Absolutely
plan
we will
out
do
for
that.
this. Yeah.
So guys, this is all from our side. And if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos with the similar experts. And if you find this video useful, do share it in your network, and share your suggestion, comments in the video comment box, where we can get the great insight and help us to improve our content better. This is your friend, Prabh Nair, by CISO by life, or you can say mentor by life or CISO by day. Good day. Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Parag. Thank you so much.